Everyone, welcome back to the Swift Academy. In today's video, we are trying to learn about how data flows inside the SwiftUI. We are going to cover two property wrapper called state and binding and describe how you can actually connect a child view property to the main view and how you can actually handle the data, because in SwiftUI, as you know that each view is a kind of the struct. So we are going to talk about how we can keep the data inside that view. In Swift, we have two types of the data. One of them are value types and the other ones are reference types. If you know about the Swift, the value types, the ones that actually data will be copied. For example, when you're passing a data to a function, it may be a string, boolean, or other kind of the data that you may create it of that, the data will be copied. But if it is a reference type, the data is passing by a reference. For example, if you are passing a class, you are just passing the reference to that class inside that memory. You know about the ARC or ARC structure, that it is creating a reference to that object inside the memory. So in SwiftUI, we are going to talk about the property, state, and binding as the value types. And also later on, I'm going to create a video to talk about the reference types that we call as the observed object, state object, and environment object. But in today's video, we are going to heavily focus on the value types, that property, state, and binding. The properties inside a view is just read only, and you can't actually change that data. You remember that the views are struct, so the data inside that is immutable. Then we are going to use a state. This property wrapper is going to tell the Swift we need that data, so later on when you are going to rebuild or recreate the view inside the SwiftUI, you need to have a state of that data. And if you are going to bind a child view to that view and passing a data together, you can use the property wrapper of binding. It doesn't mean that that property is going to be initialized inside the child view, because it will be initialized inside the main view with a state that passed to that binding. So the read and write without ownership will be happen for the binding, and it will be update its own data and a two-way connection with the state. Now let's jump into the Xcode. I will show you how each of them actually work and what's the meaning of them. I just create a simple app inside the SwiftUI. It has one VStack, and inside the VStack we have just a text. I want to add a counter at the end of our text, so I'm going to create a variable here called count, and it will be the type of the integer, and I'm going to initialize it with 1. I'm going to add it to our text here. So, and when the view is going to be updated itself, we are going to have the hello world 1. Now I'm going to click on this text here and increment our count. So how we are going to do that? I'm going to use the untap gesture, going to say self.count plus equal to 1. As you can see, because we are inside an struct and the variables inside the struct are immutable, we can't do that. So we are going to use a property wrapper called state to solve this problem. When we are going to add a state here before our property or variable, we are telling the SwiftUI, hey, we want to keep an eye on this variable. Even when you are going to create or rebuild your view, we want to have a state to this variable. So now let's see what will happen. I'm going to resume. It will be rebuilt without an issue, and say, okay, I'm going to run the app inside the viewer here. Now I'm clicking on the hello world. You can see now on each click, the tab gesture will be happen and the count will be incremented. So on each tab, I'm going to have the count incremented and it will be update the UI. You know that when it's going to change the text is inside this one, it will be change the whole view, the whole struct will be rebuilt again. And because the SwiftUI has a reference to that state variable that we have here, it will be always have the value of that variable and increment it when we are tapping on the text here. Now imagine that we want to add a button, a custom button at the bottom of this text here. So I'm just quickly create a custom button here. Now I'm going to add this custom button to this view. Okay, I'm going to add some padding here for the text, and underneath of it, I'm going to add the custom button here, custom button. As you can see, when I'm creating the view, the custom button that I'm just created added on the bottom of this text. So I want to, each time I'm clicking on this button, update the count inside our view. How we are going to achieve that? Now the other property wrapper is come to be handy for us now. We are going to use the binding pattern. It is a child view inside our main view, and we can make a two-way connection between our child view and the main view here. So I'm going to add a variable here, and using the binding property wrapper here, binding var counter, it will be integer as well. And you see that I don't need to initialize this parameter here. And for action, I'm going to just use the counter plus equal 1, and I'm going to increment it here. So now, as you can see, the Xcode yelling at us that, okay, I need a parameter here. The type will be binding. If I want to bind the counter inside this child view with our view, the count here, we can just use the $sign count. After the $sign, we have to specify our variable count that we use the property wrapper of a state here. And it means that it will be automatically initialize the counter with the initialized value of the count inside our main view. So let's run the app and see what will be happen. Now, each time I click on the click me here in the child button that added to the main view, it will be increment our count inside the view, and also it will represent itself and reveal the view and show the number here. Now I want to show you that this binding is a two-way connection. If I added the counter at the end of the text for the button, you can see that when we run the app again, it doesn't matter. You click on the hello world or you click on the click me, the counter and the count that bind together will be updated automatically because of the binding and the state property wrapper. So this is how you are going to use the binding and state for the SwiftUI, and we are going to pass the data between one child view or one main view. And also this binding will be helpful when we are going to use the view models. If you're familiar with the MVVM pattern inside the UIKit, we are using the boxing or binding there. I created a free course for that, and I will put the link inside the description. Make sure you check the MVVM pattern for the UIKit as well. So with the help of the binding and the state property wrapper, we can actually solve and pass data inside the SwiftUI. I hope you learned something new with this video. Please subscribe and like this video. See you on the next time.